上面的这个人与环境的互动的这个探讨呢，就是这个目前呢就是进入到第二个环境伦理的这个主题。我们现在以掌声的来欢迎welcome Professor Dr. Hoover to give the second talk about the environmental ethics. Okay, please.
Thank you. So, one slide less.
Oh, no. Okay, welcome back. And we're now going to the more ethical side of my topic. So, I just recall the two fundamental principles we have to remember. Time is different between humans and nature, and everything is dynamic. I just discussed with my wife, not everything is dynamic, so to speak. Human minds are not dynamic. Sometimes old people say, oh, these young, they are terrible, they don't work, they just want pleasure, nothing. But the same story we heard from ancient Greeks. I think Aristotle wrote that, and the same thing is not an invention by the old Greeks, but we found this in each old Egyptian text. Old Egyptian priests who complained that the young people were of no use. So it's always the same. Some things in the human mind are a constant, but what we do is not constant. And of course nature is not constant either. Anyway, humans and nature are two concepts that have often been considered separately, and we think that humans are driven by rationalism and nature is driven by determinism. This is again the way of separating the two. We are rational and nature is not. Of course, nature is deterministic. All processes in nature follow the biological, chemical, physical laws of nature, and these laws are linear. They're linear under a certain condition. A rock falls down when there is no resistance. So, rocks sit on the slope, but when the resistance stops, or when for some reason or other the slope becomes unstable, then the rock will fall down. Humans, in the human realm, it's a bit different. We have no laws. We only have what we say quasi-laws. We tend to follow a certain pattern, but it is never quite predictable. This is what we call limited rationality. We pretend that we are rational, but in fact we are not quite. These processes in the human world, they are dictated by the way we think, by the way we anticipate. We think that something could happen, but it's not quite rational. Economists believe they are rational. They have their cost-benefit analysis, and they say under a certain condition then things will develop in a certain way. But it's the condition which is important. And one of the conditions is also their expectations, and is also how they actually think. In fact, we all operate under conditions of uncertainty. At least in our normal human life, it is uncertainty which dictates. And if we do something, then I'm not quite sure what are the consequences on the natural environment. what are the consequences on our neighbor? Keeping up with the Joneses. If I buy a new car, will my neighbor buy a new car too, because I have a new car? Or is he rational and says, my car is okay? So this uncertainty is the limit to our rationality. We have limited knowledges, nobody knows everything, and our perceptions of how we see space and time, they are different. Each of us here has a different perception of the so-called reality. But this also means that we are not quite capable to learn from history. As I said before, we know that wars are bad, but we still carry on with wars. We know that drinking too much alcohol is bad, but we still keep on drinking alcohol, etc., etc. Okay, come on. Uncertainty is a word which I have heard every day these past month. When I wrote this section here, this presentation, it was just before Britain voted on the Brexit. Britain out of the European Union. And since that, what was it, the 23rd of September, I think it was, so it's less than a month ago, a month ago, since then, uncertainty has been, I think, the most frequent word on the news. And I don't follow it systematically, but I see it every day. You see all these very pessimistic views, say Britain's gross domestic product will drop by, here it is, 8%, but that's the exports, but it doesn't matter. Its export will drop. The pound has dropped now, and it's uncertainty. The economy doesn't like uncertainty. We don't know what is going to happen, how Britain will be able to get this Brexit right. Will Britain leave the EU? We don't know that. Theresa May, the new Prime Minister, said, yes, we will. Brexit is Brexit. But now the Parliament wants to have a word in it. So they have an internal dispute about who can actually, in the end, decide on the negotiations with the EU. London as a finance centre seems to be threatened, they say, and that most banks will move to somewhere else, Frankfurt in Germany, for example, or anywhere else. Then there is the free trade treaty between Canada and the European Union, the CETA, Canadian-European Trade Agreement, which is now, I don't know whether it is today blocked, but it was blocked because a small regional parliament in Belgium voted against. And what are the fears? Trade will diminish. That's the fear. And the hope of such an agreement is trade should be improved. But the uncertainty is this true? Because at least there's one factor in trade which we just take for granted, and this is cheap transport. But what happens if suddenly fuel prices go up? This might have a very negative influence on trade. Anything which is between Canada and Europe is either ship or airplane, and if they are very transport cost sensitive, so we don't know what's happening. So uncertainty is a constant in life. Now, everything depends on our worldviews, and every society has its particular worldviews. And of course, I come from a Western society, you come from a different society, you have a different ways of looking at the world. But in our traditional worldview, we had a very clear order. And this lasted until around the Middle Ages. We had God, the supreme being. Then we had humans. And then we had the rest of the world, which was all other creatures and everything else. And God directed the humans, and humans directed or were masters of the animal world, of the plants and of everything else. In the 15th, 16th century, we lived the age of enlightenment, when God was questioned and when humans began to discover their own creative nature. And all of a sudden, humans lifted themselves up on the same level as God, as the actual creator of the world. So the hierarchy, which was very vertical, was disturbed. Humans and God shared responsibility for all the other creatures. The Enlightenment, which made all the discoveries possible of the world by the Europeans, the Enlightenment prepared the way for the Industrial Revolution. And the worldview changed again in the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, humans saw themselves as creators, as the big creators. They could produce machines which God could not. So humans were more important than God. God still sort of ruled over the other creatures, but humans became more important in ruling over other creatures. So that's how our worldview changed. But technology and science went on. And at least that is now my personal interpretation of the evolution, is that in the 20th century, God disappeared altogether. And we had a new God, which was science and technology, which was put more or less on an equal level with humans. We create science and technology, and with this, we dominate everything else. But the evolution carries on, goes on, and in the 21st century, which is now, science and technology obviously has taken the lead. It's again a God, but science and technology is the God now, and we are subject to it, and all other creatures are subject to us. Proof for this is, what happens if I lose my computer? I'm completely lost. I have no I have printed out my notes, but I have only printed out the text and the pictures, but I can't show the pictures on this, like this, you know. I'm really dependent on this technology. This is the European worldview, which has spread across the world, but of course there are other possible worldviews. Polytheistic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., they have quite a different view of the world, much more holistic, because the world is not restricted to humans. The world is everything. So, I was very pleased to find a quote by the Dalai Lama. I quote, "So far as the physical level of experience is concerned, there is not much difference between ourselves and other animals' species. Animals too have the capacity to feel both pain and well-being." I think this is actually a statement which gives an essential morality of Buddhism. Namely, I quote, the ethics of restraint, that is, refraining from harming others. Which means a fundamental order not to kill. Of course, we have parallels in our religion, in Christianity. We have the sixth commandment, which says, "Thou shalt not kill." We have Confucius, who said, "What you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others." So we get a similar level of ideas. The Quran has certain passages which are exactly the same, and basically this all means that life is sacred, at least in theory, because there are wars. There's only one thing which I would add here. The Dalai Lama speaks of the animals. I would also include plants, because plants are also living beings, and they are also sentient beings. There are African worldviews, and they have, again, a different view of the world. The world, the universe is constructed around the fourfold order. This fourfold order is the laws of nature, a moral order among people. There is a religious order, and there is a mystical order in the universe. And these four, nature, people, religion, and mysticism, they act together. And together they create harmony. Harmony, of course, very important also in Buddhism. It is again, in a way, top-down. We have the God up here, and the universe which is inhabited by humans, by animals, by plants, and by mystical life and spirits. Spirits are very important in this context. So the superiority of man over nature is still somewhere, because man is at the center of the universe, but the universe is not only material, but it's also mystical. So there's a balanced relationship, and there's also a holistic view. And the presence of spirits invokes a certain degree of humility. So we are, in that sense, as humans, we are just part of an ecosystem. We are not above something else. We are embedded, if you like. So drawing on this experience, I think we need really a new worldview, which I should say is in a way a future worldview, where we find back to this supreme force or being, which I simply call God, but the word evokes something like human being, but which is the thing. It's a spiritual force with a short name, which rules over humans, over all other creatures that together form the ecosystem. And what is most important is that we learn to dominate science and technology. This is human beings like you and me, and not robots, who will sit at the reception and greet you with a metallic voice saying, "Hello, Mr. So-and-so." No, human beings, this is important. In order to find our way back to such a worldview, which is holistic, all-encompassing, we have to adjust our value system. Values, these are what we call general fundamental principles, which direct our decisions and actions, and which encompass beliefs about religion, political outlook, moral standards, etc. I use here two terms which look religious but which are not actually religious: sacred and secular. They must be seen from the spiritual side, rather. They are actually attitudes which mirror the way we act. The two terms are in fact neutral, and they can be applied by a Buddhist as well as by a Muslim or by anybody else. The religion is not an issue in that case, you know. What is more important is that these two, they are the end points of two extremes, if you like, of a continuum. And our values, in fact, they evolve on this continuum. Our behavior oscillates between the two. And I think this is perfectly normal. Sacred values, they are for conservation, they promote solidarity among people, they are behind sustainability. Secular values, they promote innovation, they are an expression of egoism, and they favor the exploitation of the environment, etc. You see these different extremes: respect, contempt, exclusion, inclusion, etc. So to reorient the economy would mean to come to its more sustainability, to come to a green economy which respects natural processes, which shows some humility towards towards what is stronger than humans. And this will be the essence of the green economy. I haven't found a corresponding term. I call it the one-way economy, which is the throwaway philosophy. You could say it's maybe the blue economy or whatever you may call it. The idea is that the green economy reduces the ecological footprint. And recently we had a very interesting referendum in Switzerland in that respect. Switzerland, just as a parenthesis, we are a direct democracy, and we have the possibility to demand from the people, to demand changes in the constitution. So there was a proposal that our constitution should contain an article which is oriented towards a green economy, with the government looking into more sustainable economic ways. This article was rejected by the people with a substantial majority of 63%, so almost 2/3 of the Swiss who went to the polls, they were actually against the green economy. This would have meant a victory of the sacred values over the secular values. Now, we don't have this in the Constitution, but of course there has been a very strong debate about this. And if there is a debate about something, you know that people begin to rethink their habits, their attitudes. But obviously the economy still played with the fear of the people, with the uncertainty of what will happen if we adopt this article into the Constitution. The biggest fear is, and you will find this everywhere, always, loss of jobs, loss of income, and then we have to give up our lifestyle. It is always the same argument. If it comes to a law on the exportation of weapons, then the same arguments come again. It is a loss of jobs, it means a loss for the economy, and you will lose your comfortable lifestyle. So the economy has only one argument, nothing more. And what we have to learn if we want to be stronger than the economy is we have to have better arguments. But they just have to be more towards the green economy. I've been talking about the ecological footprint, and this map here, which I picked from the Swiss Statistical Office, shows the worldwide distribution of the ecological footprint. This means how many resources of the earth does a country need. By way of example, the way we live in Switzerland, if we want to maintain this way of living, we would need 3 Earths, the resources of 3 Earths, to survive in the long run. And we are by far not the only ones. If you look at Europe, Switzerland, Germany, Russia, North America, Australia, the so-called first world, you know, the rich countries, and a few others here in the Middle East. No, that's the Stan states, former Soviet Union, and here Oman, for example. Interestingly enough, they all have a very high ecological footprint relative to the resources available. This ecological footprint concept has been developed by the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, and you can find any information on this on the internet. Of course, we have slowly evolved towards excessive resource use, and this evolution can be followed through the development of our value system. I come back to the continuum of sacred and secular values. Sacred to the left, secular to the right. And if we look at history, human history, we will find that in early human history, when humans were simply predators, that's hunters, gatherers, fishermen, they lived off what nature gave. Then, of course, they're in their own self-interest, they cherished the sacred values because they depended on the self-renewal of natural resources. With the Neolithic revolution, then, man began to cultivate the earth. This meant a shift towards more secular values, because then man learned to exploit the earth. But of course, he still depended on the renewal of the earth's resources. So the value use continuum, we shifted towards the middle. Man was the cultivator, but by cultivating we will still be that we look after nature, but we extract more than we extract in the predator age. Then we had the Enlightenment Revolution, which opened up humans' Western European spirits, and was followed by the Industrial Revolution, and here man became the dominator of nature. Discovered that we can not only exploit nature through agriculture, but also through exploitation of mineral resources, that we can construct machines, that we can even make human work partly superfluous, and machines took over the job of the people, and the values used shifted more to the exploitative side. Sacred values were of no use because they prevented progress, and progress was most important. Until we came to the information revolution, which was the digital revolution, whatever you may call it. This revolution, which makes it possible for us to see in real time what is happening in some other place of the world. We have world news. What happens an hour ago, we can know through the internet what happened where. We can exchange films, pictures, etc. It's the instant world. And this has also raised our awareness about what has been going on with this value shift. And all of a sudden, I think this started in the 1960s, all of a sudden then the values are slowly drifting back more towards the secular side. Environmental conservation has become a key word. Sustainability has become a key word since the Rio 1992. Everybody talks of sustainable development, not just development, but sustainable development. The need of the future has become important, not the need of the present anymore. So this is a shift back. It's not a return to a state of humans in Neolithic time or in Paleolithic time, but it's a new awareness. And this is what gives me hope, that we are, to some extent, we have learned from history. Not from everything that has happened in history, but I think there's hope with human beings still. This green movement is really a swing back to the sacred values. With sustainability conservation. And sacredness actually has nothing to do with religion, but it has to do with attitude. It's a universal phenomenon. It means to protect something. A sacred mountain is a mountain which you protect, which you have respect for, which is venerated. But it's a spiritual respect. And there are many sacred mountains around the world. This Uluru in Australia is one, the Kailash in Tibet, or Mount Olympus in Greece. They're all sacred. And this says that you should not climb them, for example. We are not respecting this necessarily. There's a footpath going on one place, going up the Mount Uluru, but this footpath is often closed because of the weather. Although it's always beautiful weather, but it can rain, so footpath is not automatically always open. And you should not go up there, even if you can. Mountains is one thing. Trees, for example, the old Celts, they venerated the holly. The old Germanic tribes, they venerated the oak. And Buddhism was eventually fought out under the Bodhi tree. And this Bodhi tree, although it's no longer the original one, it is still a sacred tree. This means you respect it, you don't cut it down. Maybe it falls down because it is old, then it can be replaced, but you respect it. This change of attitudes has a number of milestones. Now here we have the date. 1968 was Silent Spring by Rachel Carson's. 1968 was also the first year when the UNESCO held a conference on conservation and rational use of the biosphere. Mark, rational use of the biosphere. This means that you think about how you use the biosphere. 2 years later, they launched a research program, worldwide, Man and Biosphere, the MAB program. And 1 year later, you had the first UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, of which there are now, I think, about 500 across the world, regions that are under partial to total protection, where you have, the basic idea is to have a core area which is protected, but outside the core area, humans can still follow certain activities. 1972, we had this famous book report by the Club of Rome, which is actually the club of the industrialists, The Limits to Growth, and the first environmental conference in Stockholm by the United Nations. This is where the political instances, the United Nations, became involved. UNESCO is only a part of the United Nations organization, but in 1972 it was the UN which really started on earnest. Then you can see how this develops. 1987, I think this is another key date. That was the report, Our Common Future, by the study group, headed by Gro Harlem Brundtland, then Norwegian Prime Minister, which prepared the ground for the United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development in Rio, the so-called First Earth Summit. 10 years later, Rio plus 10. 20 years later, Rio plus 20, so conferences are going on, and these are just the major milestones here which mark the development of ideas about the relations between humans and environment. And for me, it's very significant. You have a woman who is the first person to point to this really serious problem. In my previous presentation, I presented this model showing the benefits of organic farming to the entire ecosystem, to nature and society, this win-win situation. Organic farming is in fact a perfect illustration of such a value shift. Nature is clearly above humans, and nature provides us with food. It's either directly, you can go and collect berries and fruit in nature, or it goes through the work of the farmer. But the farmer provides food, and food is important for our health, just as nature as such is important for our health. Switzerland has a relatively thriving organic agriculture nowadays. I can say this now in 2016. It's something which was completely marginal 20 years ago. You were a very strange person if you asked for organic fruit. Shops were looked at with suspicion. But now we have an organic agriculture organization which has its own label, which looks at natural diversity on organic farms. So there are no monocultural organic farms, but there are diverse organic farms. The livestock must be ethologically sound. The management and the feeding is important. You don't just give anything. So BSE crisis would not have been possible under ecological farming, under organic farming. Of course, chemically synthesized pesticides and fertilizers, they are banned. You don't use genetic engineering. You don't use unnecessary additives, flavorings or coloring. The product has a certain color. You don't have to make this redder than red through the addition of chemicals. And of course, organic production and processing is subject to constant inspection so that the standards are maintained. So these labels stand for sacred value, and they tell the consumer what he can expect from the products he buys. And the directing concept of BioSwiss, which is the Swiss organization, is really very complicated. This interplay between natural and societal factors is complex, but it is important to guarantee the quality. So we have the natural impacts, we have the diversity of plants, we have of course welfare, animal welfare, but we also have the price system, which is a social affair. We have social responsibility towards the collaborators on organic farms. They are not just there, but they have to be cared for as well. Of course, soil fertility, saving energy and water, and an important element is the traceability of the products. If you buy organic meat, you should basically know where from this meat comes. When I buy organic eggs in the supermarket, there is a code on the egg. If I put this code into the Google, then it gives me the name of the farm where these eggs have been produced. So there is transparency also towards the consumer. So all this shows that organic agriculture in confrontation with conventional agriculture is certainly better because it's nature-oriented, it is extensive, which means it's not on profit, first of all, but it's on sustainability. It's quality, which is much more important than quantity, and it's long-term thinking, whereas conventional agriculture is really short-term thinking because it's profit that is most important. Of course, conventional agriculture is still the so-called modern agriculture, and organic farming resembles more the traditional way of farming. But what is actually modern? We can have a philosophical debate about the term modern. Modern means basically just now. The present, the recent past. What is the recent past? Don't discuss about this now, but this is also a question of when do we stop modern and when does the future begin? But just think, when sometime back in history, the people developed the bow and arrow to hunt animals for a certain distance. This was modern weapon. Today, it is a sports weapon. It is a traditional, old-fashioned weapon. I know certain guerrillas use bow and arrow again, but this is the exception rather than the rule. So, nowadays I should say that organic farming is no longer traditional farming, but this is modern farming. And what we call modern farming is in fact old-fashioned farming, because it is based on an old concept of short-term thinking, profit thinking, and monocultures. So it will be outdated rather than, not even traditional, it will not even be called traditional, it will be called outdated farming. Value changes, the energy sector is also a very good illustration. Certain countries still believe in the value of nuclear energy. We have a very big debate in Europe about nuclear energy at the moment. Germany has resolutely decided to close, or has closed down, all their nuclear power stations. They are now building them back. It takes much more time, it will be much more expensive than anticipated. In Switzerland, we have decided in principle that we will phase out, that we will end nuclear energy, but we have no date. We only know that one nuclear energy power station will close in 2019.
No new ones.
We will not have new ones, that's correct. We will not have new ones, but the old ones, there's no end date. Now, at the end of next month, the end of November, we will go to a referendum which would call for all 5 nuclear power stations to be closed by, 2033. The first 3 should close next year, the 4th should close 2029, and the 5th by 2033. I don't know how this referendum will turn out. Maybe we will reject it, but maybe not. We have already, 40 years ago, managed to prevent the construction of a nuclear power station through public protests. And we do not know where we are going to stock our nuclear waste. It is at the moment, it is stocked in an intermediary place in one of the oldest nuclear power stations. But we're still looking for a final deposit for 100,000 years. They haven't found it yet. Neither has Germany. Neither have the British. The British will construct a new power station, or 2 new power stations in the future. So this is very controversial. It's a modern energy, but in fact it's outdated. It's not profitable, and it's not long-term oriented. We do have renewables, and we do have an abundant supply of renewable energy. We have wind energy. You don't see much there, but it is there. We do have solar energy. This very strange picture shows actually a solar power station, I think must be in either Spain or United States, with a central mirror, and side mirrors, they reflect the sunlight to this central mirror, creating a high heat, and which then is transmitted underground and which can heat water to produce electric energy. This is a sort of still old-fashioned thinking. We have to have very big power stations. But there's also the decentralized possibility of solar captures for hot water generation and for solar panels for electricity generation. And if every household can produce its own electricity and its own hot water, you don't need big centers anymore. But then the government cannot control you. Too much decentralization is of course also against central control. So there's a pro and contra depending on whether you look at it as a citizen, or as an individual, or whether you look at it as a representative of the political system, or of the economic system. There's wave energy, symbolized by this wonderful wave here. Wave energy holds an enormous potential for countries with sea access on the coast. There have been various experiments. Nothing has been conclusively so profitable that under current circumstances wave energy can be commercialized, but the potential is there. And the sea is a constant. It changes permanently, but it's a constant. The sea is always there. So that would be, at least for countries like Britain, France, China in certain regions, there's a huge potential which we could tap. But this takes time, of course. It takes a lot of time to convince the people. Solar energy, I think, is by far the most advanced in this respect. And I mean, I'm a little bit proud, being a Swiss, that that I can talk about briefly about this project, Solar Impulse. You've probably heard of this, an airplane which flies around the world without fuel. It was driven by two persons. One of these two persons, Bertrand Piccard, he is actually a psychologist. And the other one is an engineer, André Boschberg, but he has no engineering connection to aviation. So they're both greenhorns when it comes to flying, but both had a vision. And it doesn't matter if you are an aircraft engineer or if you are a psychologist. If you have a vision, you can find the sponsors and the technicians who believe in you. And these two men, they found the sponsors in the industry and the technicians who were willing to work. Because creating an aircraft that flies on solar power alone is certainly a technological challenge. It has to be light, it has to have a large surface for solar panels, and it has to have space for at least one pilot. So Solar Impulse 2, which was the one that went around the world, had a wingspan of 72 meters, which is more than a jumbo jet. And it had the weight of an ordinary car. And a car like we came along, maybe less than a ton, less than 1,000 kilos. It had space for one pilot. And of course this pilot, he was alone on the whole journey. They alternated. Boschberg did part, Piccard did a part, etc. But he could only sleep for 20 minutes at a time. Then he had to wake up and to see that the plane was going correctly. You could try this during the day. Sleep 20 minutes, then work, and then sleep 20 minutes, and then work. Obviously it worked for them. The round the world trip took off in Abu Dhabi on the 9th of March last year. It ended in Abu Dhabi on July the 26th this year. But They were stuck 9 months in Hawaii because they had a battery problem. I think they had to commission new batteries, so the new batteries had to be built first before they could start on. Of course, this is not a flight which was important for aviation. We're not going to build a jumbo jet which flies exclusively on solar power. It was the advocate for clean energy. So Bertrand Piccard's goal was to combine this technological innovation with a pioneer spirit and the courage to take risks. And Piccard is not alone. He is actually the third generation. You have here 3 men. His grandfather, Auguste Piccard, was the first person who mounted into the stratosphere in 1932. He mounted into the stratosphere with a helium-filled balloon and reached a height of, was it 16,940 meters, which is higher than I flew with the jet from Europe to Hong Kong. Piccard's father, his name was Jacques Piccard. He built a bathyscaphe, a submarine, a research submarine, which reached the lowest point on Earth in the Mariana Trench, not far from here. That was minus 10,000 something meters. So the grandfather went up to the highest point man had ever reached. The son went to the lowest point man could reach, and the grandson, Jacques, he then went around the world, first in a balloon in 1999, and then round the world again with this solar aircraft in 2015-2016. And in all 3 cases, the experts, the outside experts, thought this was impossible. And these 3 pioneers made the impossible possible. So you need a vision, and you need the courage to take a risk, fully aware that you may fail. And maybe in Hawaii they thought they might have failed, but it was for batteries, for nothing else. So this is, in a way, this last project, Solar Impulse 2, is in a way an illustration of how secular and sacred values meet. We have the secular value of innovation, technology, but we have the sacred value of caring for the earth. So use the technology for something good, except for something bad. This is a change of mind, and this is a change of mind which economic and political leaders in the world should operate. I don't know what is going on, what will happen, if at all something will happen in the minds. Maybe the economists see the profit of solar energy more clearly, but we know it's a question of time. Nature and society, I should say, we have to consider them together as 2 sides of a coin. Nature on one side, human society on the other. And they must be in balance. It's not for nothing that I have the tiny symbol here. Yin and Yang can only exist together, not in separation. Nature is certainly more important than society, because it's there, has been there before humans were there, and it will continue after humans have disappeared. We are maybe a species threatened by extinction. We just don't know it, but maybe. But nature will continue. And It may sound pessimistic for humans, but I think it's optimistic for the ecosystem, for nature at any rate. Now this Tai Chi symbol, it's very popular, it's become very popular. I saw it in the garden of a friend of ours. I came across it on Google Earth with these two villages in Yunnan province in China. They are situated near Yunlong. They are called Taiji villages because they are situated on this meander, one here, one there. And my big surprise was, for some reason or another, I typed on, was it YouTube or just Google, I typed Edinburgh tattoo, this spectacle of military music, and then I found the Scottish pipes and drums who marched into the arena and formed the perfect Tai Chi symbol, yin yang. It is very popular. It is not a very easy shape to create, so they must have rehearsed a long time, but it's the same, it's the idea of harmony which is there. So I come back to this slide which I showed before, the limitations of the ecosystem, but also the potential of the ecosystems. We can use it, we can use the potential. It has this built-in buffer which allows an excess use for some time, but we have to come back and into its normal way. But if we go up exceeding beyond this ultimate limit, we don't know where this limit is, then we don't know what the price will be. Certainly someone will have to pay the price, and it will be a social price. The rift between the haves, the rich, and the have-nots, the poor, will widen. Social unrest is likely to increase. We have to recognize that nature is not just a source where we can take anything we want to get, where we can dump all our waste as we like, that we have to live with it. Again, this is commonplace, and when this was made public in this famous book, The Limits to Growth, in 1972, more than 40 years ago, there was a huge outcry and saying, no, the model is wrong, the mathematics are wrong, it's not true. But the reality shows that it was true, it was prophetic. And even when the authors recalculated, built in more parameters, they found that the model was still sound. There are limits to growth. There's no unlimited growth. So what we have to do is follow the Buddhist morality of restraint and humility. Thank you very much for your attention. You have to go across the bridge from pride to humility.
OK， 大家有没有什么问题？有没有什么问题对于他这次就是说第二个演讲，第二个演讲呢就谈到这个环境的伦理的问题，那里头呢有讲到就是说是人跟自然之间呢其实是一体之两面，就尤其人跟社会是一体之两面，但是实际上呢人呢基本上就是说是存在的时间呢没有自然那么久，所以他在这个演讲里头呢有提到，就是说，其实自然呢是时间在地球上存在的时间呢是比人久，比人呢就是说是更能够占有这个优势，那更重要啊，比人呢还更重要。当然，在这样一个过程里头呢，人呢，如果说 也是很明智的跟自然来配合的话，那当然呢，人也是可能有乐观的前景。所以在这里呢，就是老师一直提到，就是不管是能源的发展或资源的使用，如果是能够尊敬自然，很自然而然的，就说是这个人的这个社会的存续呢，会比较有乐观的这个前景呢，就说是这个路上啊。那他也提到，就有 sacred 跟 secular 这两个不同极端的一个价值观。那 secular 就是要发展，然后要创新。那 sacred 就是要保育啊。那他在这两个极端的这个价值里头呢，他也找出一个共同的出路，就是说这两个合作，如果是从事于环境保护的这个方向的话，像说他在谈到节省能源，那个创造这个太阳能的飞机，从这个阿布达比飞到这个要环游世界，飞到那个夏威夷，虽然在夏威夷停了9个月，但是呢，他最后这个把他的这个电池修好以后，又继续可以飞到阿布达比啊。那他用这个例子来显示说其实这两个价值观呢是可以合作，然后为这个我们地球呢的不管自然或人呢是可以，就是说是做一个比较好的一个这个作为，就是将来再生能源呢可能变成所谓的具有现代的价值，将来这个不管是核能或者是这些这个必须要消耗这个自然资源的这些能源，将来可能变成 traditional 过去，所以有可能是这样的一个转变。在里头呢有提到这 organic farming， 就有机的农作。那现在看起来就是说，很多人把它视为是过去的 traditional 传统的农作，但也有可能在将来，就说是现行的惯行的农作被称为现代化的农业，将来有可能变成 traditional 过去的，然后呢，有机的这个农业呢，可能会变成所谓的 modern 就现代的农作，也有可能，所以这是一个 dynamic， 就是他提到就是其实是一个这个动态的一个发展。那最后他提到这个太极，其实就是讲说自然跟社会呢，人的社会是一体之两面，其实要互相呢，尤其是人的社会必须要调整跟自然保持一个和谐的关系，这样的话才会长久。那我不晓得大家有没有什么这个提问啊，要请教这个Professor Langwood. Water,
yes.
Let me introduce one of our professor in the program. Yeah, Professor. Yeah, Huang. Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
有没有问题？
是
OK，
好，先给麻烦老师帮我就是就现在的这个状况而言啊，
对，
人类的很多的生活方式都已经被局限住，那就是整个大环境有它一个既定的一个模式在，然后这个生活方式因为它已经固定了，而且被习惯了，那就个人而言，好像也不得不随着这个大环境而走。比方说，我现在举2个例子，一个就是说，像是饮食上面，
什么饮食的？
对，第一个例子是饮食。那我们 现在不得不吃说是使用农药跟化肥种出来的农作物。那真的要去找天然的、环保的一个种植出来的农作物很难。然后另外还有一个就是说，像是手机的使用啊，现在手机都是一个很容易、很快就汰换掉的那种消耗品。可是也不能因为说不环保，我们就都禁用手机，都不使用这个东西。
这是一个常规选。
对。那现在想问就是说，不知道是不是有什么方式可以突破这样的困境？就是感觉我们个人都受限于这样整个大环境的一个算是被制约的一个模式。
所以要打破。OK，
谢谢。
大再问啊。But he asked the question is, we already been fixed with the conventional life, so we eat some food and from the cultivated land with the fertilizer and also pesticide, but we could not do anything about it. And how can we fight against this kind of situation? And that is the first question. And second question is related to our mobile phone, because it's invented, for a short period of time. Then they change different kind of version, and different kind of version, and you need to throw it away. But we cannot stop using it, so we always throw away the old one and buy the new one.
Yeah, this is it's a vicious cycle, definitely. As to food, I think there are always.
As to the food issue, there are on offer. You can buy organic food, and you can buy conventional, what I call conventional food. So what we can do, we are consumers. We can just say we do not consume, or we consume only organic food. And then, this is one possibility as consumers. As consumers, we can also exercise pressure on the political system. This depends from one country to another. It is different according to the political system. Maybe you have to work through NGOs, pressure groups, environmental pressure groups, that they influence politicians to say, we want legislation that promotes organic farming and that disadvantages conventional farming. We could say, give subsidies to organic farmers so that their products are cheaper. Of course, then it will be said it's distortion of the market, and the government has to find an answer and say, well, it's a health issue, so we use money from the health funds to finance good food. This is a possibility. Political pressure and consumption, promote consumption of healthy food, then this will help. But that's the economic way, More demand of healthy food will create more production. And the political pressure will help to create new framework, new legal frameworks for organic production. And with the iPhone, with the cell phone, it is the same. You can say, I don't need the new one. As a consumer, we can exercise pressure on the economy. We just do not realize that we can do it. I have only one example which shows how consumers can influence the economy. That was in the 1980s. Shell company, petroleum company Shell, they had an oil platform in the North Sea between Norway and Britain, and they wanted to throw this oil platform away. I think it was too much or was too old, so the idea was that they take this oil platform to the edge of the shelf and dump this in the Atlantic at about 2,000 meters depth. Greenpeace objected. They occupied the platform, they were attacked, etc., but this created a public outcry, and Shell was forced to renounce this idea because Greenpeace called for a boycott of Shell. And I think within a few weeks, Shell sold 25% less petrol in Europe. And the boycott had this effect that Shell took the platform, towed it to the Norwegian fjord, they dismantled it. Part of the platform was used to create the pier of a new harbour. Scrap iron could be sold. So in the end, it was a win-win situation. But it needed the boycott of Shell products. And I think this is something we do not realize, that as consumers, if we are conscious, we can act on the economy. Just don't buy the latest cell phone. As long as your old one works. Of course, if they build in a self-destructive element, which makes that after 2 years the cell phone breaks down, we have no choice, we have to use other measures. But we have power as consumers, we do have power. We must just realize it. It's small, it's a small power, but if many consumers do that, it can have an effect.
听得懂吗？
请老师帮我翻译。
Sorry, it is tricky. It is very tricky.
他说是还是有办法改变这个现状，就是刚刚举一个例子，但是比较极端的例子，就是说是他是在先进国家，那像那个石油公司，那个壳牌的石油公司在北海，它有一个这个油井挖油的那个油井，那他曾经做了不好的示范，就是把那个污染中心呢，就是在海里荡。然后呢，这个绿色和平组织呢，就这个起来呢，就说是反对这样的一个做法，就占领了那个壳牌公司的挖油的那个平台，整个平台。然后呢，这个事件虽然这个很激烈的一个行动，是绿色和平组织发起的。那当然就说是他们这些人呢，可能这个有就是被处理还是怎么样，但是因为有这样的一个事件，所以呢，英国全国的这个绿色的运动呢就发起来，就是说就是民间的这些老百姓组织就是反对使用壳牌的油，所以它的这个整个一个壳牌的这个油的销售量就是大量减少至少20%以上，所以他就受不了受这样的压力，他最后就只好这个妥协，跟那个民间来妥协，然后保证要把这个污染的问题处理。
就是透过就是联合大家一起来。
对，就是要大家一起合作，合作。那其实他在里头有提到，就是说你刚刚问的这些问题，就是说有关这些你现在我们就制约于现在这个农药跟肥料的这个作物，我们不得不买啊这些问题。实际上他是讲说这样的一个 process 是很慢的，要改变这个现状还是很不容易的。但是呢， 就要慢慢的来处理这个事情，慢慢要改变。那个改变呢是，他在讲说是将来的 organic farming， 就是有机的农作呢，就会慢慢的就说使起来以后，就在市场上会越来越 popular， 就变成所谓的 modern 的这个所谓的农作，就是现代化的农作。然后呢，这个将来可能就是现在的 conventional 这个 agriculture， 就是惯型的农业，这样慢慢会 phase out， 就是对，慢慢就是消失，然后呢就是变成以后就会讲说这种农业的农耕的方式是一个变成 traditional 过去的，所以这个所谓的 modern 跟 traditional 其实是一个动态的，那有这样提到，但是这个过程呢是可能是会比较慢，
需要时间。
对，就是慢。有没有其他问题？我们时间也差不多了哈。OK， 好，那我们今天的演讲呢，就到这里啊。我们就再以热烈的掌声，谢谢呀，please give big hand to our lecturer, Professor Van Gruber. Thank you very much. And